Welcome back to the second hour of Love Babz, Love Talk. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy. I get to talk to Christie Stewart this morning from the Centers for Housing Opportunity. And the Center for Housing Opportunity, an initiative of the Housing Collective, works to regionally support the equitable production, preservation, and protection of housing that is safe and affordable for people of all incomes, ages, and backgrounds. Utilizing a collaborative, data-driven approach, the center facilitates regional collective impact initiatives that strategically align resources and organizations from multiple sectors to advance systems change in the housing space. And so they are partnering with a whole bunch of folks to bring this exhibit, The Practice of Democracy, A View from Connecticut, comes to New Haven today. Hello.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Now tell me about this exhibit and what will we learn from it?
Sure. We are so excited about this exhibit. And it is a long time in the making. So this exhibit is the brainchild of an incredible designer named April DeSimone, who in 2016 created a national show called Undesign the Red Line. And I was lucky enough to see that while it was in Washington, D.C. And I have been trying for years now since then to bring a version of it here. April is a visionary, transdisciplinary designer, and this show brings her sort of love and deep understanding and connection to the built environment. So, architecture and city planning and all of that. It brings that into a conversation about what we see around us in our communities today and how we ended up where we are today with some of the social challenges that we face in various communities and neighborhoods, and really an examination and exploration of the intentional policies and practices over hundreds of years that have delivered the social conditions that we live with today in our neighborhoods. So this show is a past to present sort of curation of the land use policies and community planning practices in the state of Connecticut. It focuses specifically on New Haven, also Bridgeport and the city of Norwalk. And I hope everybody has a chance to go and see it. It's a really fascinating way to think about the communities that we work and live in, and how maybe going forward we can do better in terms of planning those communities in a way that works for everyone, and calling out some of the systemic racism that has been inherent in city planning, housing development, et cetera, for many, many decades.
So the idea of this exhibit is to show us what we've been doing and how we can do better. Okay.
Yeah, it's to show us what we've been doing, right? Because, and the genesis behind that idea is that I spend a lot of time in the community talking to people about our housing issues. And we recognize that part of what's playing into all of this is there isn't a shared understanding of how our communities have been planned and built in terms of history. And to change how we do things, we have to learn how we've done them in the past. And so the idea is that we want folks to understand why some neighborhoods have been disinvested in, why some neighborhoods continue to be challenged, and to connect the dots between those challenges and intentional policies that created those challenges, so that as we plan communities going forward, we can do it better, we can do it together, and we can do it in a much more equitable way.
And so when you look at the landscape, Christie, of cities and towns that are so not on board with that kind of thinking, like a Woodbridge and all those points, do you invite them to see this and sort of help them frame this differently for themselves?
We do. We really take seriously our commitment to what is sort of a trite thing, but to meet people where they are. And we recognized early on in the work that we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years that people are in a different place in their understanding of the evolution of our communities and neighborhoods. And so, yes, we invite everyone. We've invited everyone, probably a couple thousand people to come and see this exhibit. We hope that more than that come and see it. But we do think it's a starting place for a conversation. We think it will, help create a base level of understanding about community development practices and how they impact us for generations.
So when you first saw this exhibit by the young architect, multidisciplinary architect that you talked about a few minutes ago, did you have some awareness of these practices of how communities were redlined and how racism and just had a whole and legislated racism had a huge hand in the makings of the problems that we are trying to combat now?
So I had a very preliminary understanding of that in the way that you do when you read about things like that. And for me, and this may just be the way my brain works, to see this, to have a whole visual experience that you walk through where you can actually see, yes, there's a redlining map, and we've probably all seen those, but then to pull out of that photographs of neighborhoods, thriving, vibrant communities, Black communities that were completely wiped off the map to make way for highways, for example. That kind of thing happened all across the country. And to see it, and to see the before and after photographs, and to connect dots, which this exhibit does, with personal stories of people who have lived in those spaces and how those institutional and policy decisions change generations of lives. To see it in front of you, for me, was much more powerful than to intellectually understand it, having read about it in a report.
And so, not just for the people that sort of live in these communities, but can you make inroads with architects around this subject? I mean, do they find this valuable? Are they still, like, all the architects that when they find out about this, what do you think? What do they think?
They're really, really excited. And we've been, architecture is not a world that I spend much time in. So I've been really energized by how excited the architects that I've talked to about this are, and how thoughtful many of them would, how much more thoughtful many of them are about the community process, the community design process, than perhaps they get credit for once their projects move through all of the sort of regulation and commissions and zoning and planning work. But I think that this is a great tool to open up conversations with architects, city planners, housing developers, to recognize that there is a different way to do this. Just because we've always in the past maybe not centered community in our design doesn't mean that we need to do that going forward. And in fact, we hope this exhibit, is a space for thoughtful discussion and reflection about how to do better going forward.
And so I would imagine that you would want municipal leadership to see this exhibit, as municipal leadership and housing authorities.
Yes.
To sort of see this as we've had this movement, particularly in New Haven, where housing authorities have taken old public housing stock and reimagined them for mixed income, mixed use kinds of properties.
We're really excited about the response this has gotten among policymakers. Elm City Communities in New Haven is sponsoring the New Haven exhibit. And I think it's a great sign of how progressive that group can be. Karen has been a wonderful supporter of this work. The Connecticut Housing Finance Authority is the presenting sponsor for this exhibit. And I think those are all indicators of, the change that we're seeing in terms of policymakers really rethinking, traditional community planning.
I like it. So, so everyday ordinary people won't get lost in the language and in the understanding of this.
No, I really don't think so. And there's some features to really make sure that that doesn't happen. Things like we have a redlining map of New Haven that will be at the exhibit when it opens this evening. And we encourage everyone that goes through the exhibit to sit with that map and put a pin where they live now or where they've lived in the past. And there are, throughout the exhibit, there are sort of reflective questions. You can scan a QR code and listen to stories that have been recorded, really making an effort to get folks to connect in whatever way makes sense given their histories and perspectives to the subject matter.
And so you said you're looking at what, how many cities?
We're looking at 3 cities. We're looking at Connecticut in general, but we're looking at Bridgeport, New Haven, and Norwalk. And what I really like about this show is that we do that work. We have a whole Connecticut timeline with those cities included. And then beneath it, you'll see a national timeline so that you can start to connect sort of the national trends of, slum clearance, redlining, et cetera, disinvestment, and connect those dots to the history of Connecticut so that you can put our state and our cities in context with the larger country.
So were we on par with the larger country? Were we as equally racist as the rest of the country?
Oh my goodness, what a question. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And when you look at this, Christie, what do you think? Like, what do you imagine about all of this?
So my hope, and I think because I really have annoyed a lot of people in the state to get this here. I really wanted this to come. And
well, it is International Women's Day, so happy Women's Day.
Right? Thank you.
Stand in your power.
Persistent. One way of describing it. But I think this is critical history, critical sort of information everyone who lives in any community needs to have about their community. And I really hope also that young people who live in these cities and perhaps struggle with some of the issues that have been created by racist housing policy, racist community development policy, I want them to understand that these were intentional choices that were made, and that there is no personal failing involved in being from a specific neighborhood or place. It's a big story, right? About privilege, about where you're born, how housing impacts everything in your life. And I just think it's important that everybody raise that up and examine it and think about it, as we sort of move through our day. Not, we drive right through many, many places in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. We're 9 miles away, right? The life expectancy has a 10-year differential. And that's not by accident. And I think it's important that we talk about it and educate everyone we can about it.
I mean, I love the fact that you can teach history through this very defined medium of just where you live, just by address. I think I remember reading somewhere about your address dictates where you will end up in life in terms of prison or schools and all these kinds of things. Like, it is that fine-tuned. That is almost insulting to sort of say to people, pull yourself up out of pull yourself up by your bootstrap. It's almost insulting.
It is insulting.
Is insulting, and
it's willfully ignorant. And yes, there's incredible data by a researcher named Rawls-Ivy, where by zip code you can start predicting lifetime earnings. and other things. And it just, access to opportunity matters. And as a city, as a state, as a country, we have to do better. And we need to make the choice to do better. And we really hope that this exhibit gets people thinking about that. And you might disagree with it, but at least maybe you're thinking about it.
And the disagreement would be what? Because it's factual. Like, it's not like you're making this up and
it's all factual,
and you're imagining.
That's what I love about this, is it is grounded in documents and history and policy that you can see. And there are, excerpts of that throughout the exhibit, and you can read, you can read it. You could see it in black and white. And if that's what it takes for some people to sort of believe it, then that's that's what we hope it does.
So is this exhibit or some similar exhibit is going around the country? Like, are other cities and towns and states taking this on?
Yeah. So the practice of democracy, the first practice of democracy exhibit debuted on the High Line in New York City this summer. Connecticut is its second iteration. It just left Bridgeport. It is here in New Haven, starting today through April 14th. After that, it will go to the city of Norwalk, to the community college there from April 24th to June 2nd. But April DeSimone, who created and designed and curates this, the intent is to take it all over the country. And again, it's definitely, the content is fabulous, but it's about starting the conversation in various regions, cities, everywhere we can, about a thoughtful examination of how we choose to develop our communities, and what we can do better. It's a little bit hopeful for me. I mean, I look at it and think this is an opportunity, right? We need to change what we're doing. We got to start somewhere.
I like it. So talk to me about the democracy piece, because
Sure.
that's a very specific, the practice of democracy.
Yeah. And I'm a history buff, so I'm sort of very excited by this piece of it. But the practice of democracy, the idea behind this is that we live in a country where we talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where we talk about justice and equality. And you can look at our Declaration of Independence, you can look at our Constitution, and you can read those words. But different people experience democracy in different ways in our country. And the exhibit starts with an excerpt from the Constitution, and then contrasts that with photographs or drawings, because it's that early, of slaveholders, and just really prods people to think about how you experience democracy. How has your family experienced democracy? Because it is not the same for everyone. We talk about it as Americans, but we don't all experience it the same way.
That's pretty this is a lot going on in this exhibit.
It is. I hope you go and go back and go back. It's fascinating.
I think I would try to go tonight, because
Please
I'm glad that it's there long enough so that if I don't get there, I'll still get to go.
And the designer will be there this evening to give a bit of a talk on it, which is always fascinating.
So talk to me about all the people who bought into this to bring this to fruition.
So exciting. So Connecticut Humanities is, one of the largest funders of this, which is fantastic. Connecticut Housing Finance Authority is the presenting sponsor, which is also really wonderful, and I think says great things about the leadership there. The Community Foundation for Greater New Haven is sponsoring this. The Community Foundation, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, is sponsoring this. The community colleges in Norwalk, New Haven, and Bridgeport have been real partners in this work, as have our partners at Regional Plan Association, I mentioned Elm City Communities, Liberty Bank Foundation. We sort of spread the love far and wide to bring this to the state, and are still, in fact, just closing our funding gap since this runs through into June.
I love this idea. And so, and to bring it to Gateway Community College says what?
That was super intentional. We wanted to bring it to community college campuses, specifically because they're in the heart of communities that have been particularly impacted by some of the issues explored in this exhibit, and their student population can I think get a lot out of looking at this and thinking about, right, where they are, where they've come from, where they've lived. And it just seemed like this is an exhibit that wouldn't have been as powerful, I think, if it had been placed in, I don't know, pick a fancy art gallery or something. That's just not the point, right?
Yeah. So when you look at the landscape now, Christie, we're in the midst of this housing. I hate the word crisis, but crises maybe, that there's not enough affordable housing, but yet everywhere we turn, there's luxury housing being built.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that seems so intentional and in your face, kind of. Yes, we have the ability to make housing, just not for you.
Not for you. This is what gets me out of bed every morning. This is what our organization focuses on. In our state, we are short 86,000 units of housing for extremely low income residents. And that's just untenable, right? And we're watching an increase in homelessness, and we're watching an increase in housing instability. And we need a proportionate response, if you will. A lot of the work that we do is to consider regions and try to more strategically align the very limited housing resources we have to be deployed in prioritized based on need. So it is our hope that the state and the private partners who work in the affordable housing space take a look at some of the data that we've worked hard to produce so that they understand where the need is greatest and they attack that need first. It is frustrating to watch units go up that are not affordable to those at the lowest income levels in our state, because that is not, the data shows very clearly, that is not where the gap is in housing in our state. And so, yeah, we work every day to try to elevate that idea and issue with a lot of partners across the state.
And so are people listening? Like, what is, Christie, what is required beyond listening?
Mm-hmm. I think a couple of things I often say about this, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint. It took us decades and decades to get here. Public will is required, and a shift in the way that we approach housing policy and practice, a fundamental shift, which is we need to flip it on its head. And we need to make sure that the communities that need this housing are at the table, making, using their, they're the experts on what works and doesn't work, and how this should unfold. And we need to make sure that they're at policy decision-making tables. We need to stop a top-down policy-making ivory tower approach to this work. This is highly controversial. I know I will not be making any friends putting this out there on your radio show, but we have to stop doing what we've been doing forever, which is honestly making decisions from the top down. The land use decisions that are made in our state at local commissions across 169 towns are largely made by white single-family homeowners. We have to start thinking about those things and really flipping this on its head.
So what would you say, Christie, to a town like a town like Woodbridge, who is vehemently fighting any kind of
Yeah.
conversation around affordable housing, let alone trying to build some affordable housing.
I would say it's time to look to the future. And we are not, this is not 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s America anymore. We have a massive population shift happening. Our demographics are happening. As a state, we are getting significantly older and less white. We are not, it is not the 1960s, right? We don't all want to live in the suburbs. And I think that towns that don't embrace change are going to struggle in the future. I just don't think it's sustainable, right? A vibrant community and a vibrant economy requires a diversity of housing options, requires housing opportunity. And thinking that you can hang on to single family zoning, across, 92% of our state is, good luck with that. The times are changing, people are changing, the needs of our state and our population is changing, and people need to change with it.
Do you have any hope in urban centers, sort of making urban centers attractive and affordable to all kinds of people? Now, I say that tongue in cheek because New Haven has all this luxury housing going up as we speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's always the risk of gentrification. And I think that there's some great work going on across the state to sort of look around the country and take best practices and do our best to mitigate some of that. I think, we need leaders like Karen DuBois Walton at the helm of public housing authorities who are thinking about things like that. And I think, again, we've got to just pause for a moment and stop with the business as usual, right? That's not working for folks, and think about community land trusts and land banks and cooperative housing and all the models from all over the world that folks are trying, some successfully, some not successfully, to make sure that people aren't being pushed out of their communities as they're redeveloped.
So when you look across the country, Christie, do you see any best practices, to use your words, best practices out there that you're like, oh, they get it, or they got it, or they're on the right track?
Yeah, there is some really great work going on. And while I do understand deeply the differences in Connecticut from some of these places, right? There's incredible zoning reform happening in the Midwest. Detroit and I think it's Milwaukee have some pretty amazing community land trust sort of grassroots work happening where neighbors and communities are able to access capital to buy land in their neighborhoods in a cooperative manner, to make sure that it doesn't turn over to speculative housing developers. So there are grassroots programs like that happening. There's zoning reform happening. I think we need to really look at the way that the country has defaulted to tax credits as our main means of producing and financing housing. And I think that's fine, but they don't necessarily incent the development or make it easy to build at the 0 to 30% area median income level. So the extremely low income housing that we need. So we have a lot of work to do.
But you get the sense that we might have some of the right players at the table.
I definitely do. We have amazing organizations like Desegregate CT that is really pushing zoning reform and has pushed this state farther than I ever thought it could go on that in a wonderful way. We have wonderful partners like Housing Development Fund out of Stanford, who is taking the lead on community land trusts. There are, really thoughtful, smart, innovative organizations all over the state working on this. And I think our biggest hurdle right now is public will. We have to make sure that the public will exists to influence our policymakers.
And that's simply just getting people to the table and to the spaces to raise their voices, to raise awareness in their voices.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I don't for a minute think we're ever going to change people's minds who are staunchly opposed to any of the things that we're talking about here today. But I do think there are a lot of people who just don't think about housing affordability as an issue that impacts them. And so we as advocates need to do the work to connect the dots for people like that. Housing has a huge influence on economy, if that's something that someone cares about. It has an incredible impact on healthcare, if that's something that someone cares about. Education, social mobility, employment, it's foundational. And so we have to do a better job of maybe not always saying, hey, the sky is falling, right? We have a housing crisis, and instead saying, look at the opportunity that we have if we can invest in housing in our communities to elevate the whole state.
Man, this is a good conversation. I am excited for this exhibit. Again, it's called, I love the title of this, Practicing Democracy. It's an interactive exhibit exploring planning and democracy in New Haven and in Connecticut specifically. But I want people to go. It is there. Tonight is the opening reception from 5 to 7, but it'll be there until April 14th.
Yes.
At Gateway Community College.
Yes. And then it'll move to Norwalk Community College.
And then it'll move to Norwalk Community College. So there's opportunities for people to sort of see this exhibit. Yes. Practice of democracy, a view from Connecticut experience. So thank you so much, Christie. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me, Babz.
Happy International Women's Day too.
Yes, to you as well. Thank you.
So maybe I'll get to see you in real life, maybe this evening or at some point.
Fantastic.
And Karen DeBose Walton is my best friend, and I adore her. And I
did not know that.
She has changed the trajectory of how we see housing in this city, and has clearly shown us what is possible.
She's a fabulous partner. You are lucky to have her.
Yes. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully, I'll see you this evening.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thank you. All right, Harry, play us out. We're out. Happy International Women's Day. I'll be back tomorrow. I think I have a guest tomorrow. We'll see. Let me take a quick look before we jump off. No, I don't. So it's just me again. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Maybe I might have somebody. We'll see. Might be a surprise. We'll see. Have a good day. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Paul. Y'all be safe out there. Happy International Women's Day.